Welcome, everyone, to another episode of On the House with Spartan Invest. Today, we have a returning guest, an author, Joel Miller. He's been investing in rental properties since 1978 and flipping houses since 1991. He's served in numerous leadership roles in both his professional and personal circles and teaches real estate investing at the beginner and advanced levels. Joel is also a hard money lender to other investors, a trusted mentor, podcast guest, and author of Build Real Estate Wealth, where he shares practical long-term strategies for building sustainable wealth through real estate. Joel, I had to make sure I read all of that because it was so much. Thank you so much for
I tried
joining
to
us
pare it
again.
down for you.
It's a lot. I know you have a ton of experience. We're so excited to have you back on. So tell us in your words a little bit about you.
Well, as you mentioned, I've been investing in rentals since 78, so I got like 48 years under my belt here, primarily residential rentals, but I've had commercial property as well, and flipped over 100 houses since 91, and eventually got into the hard money lending, which gives me a lot of satisfaction because I'm part of the equation for others in their journey. You know, the other investors that are doing flips and acquiring rentals that they want to stabilize and then get permanent financing on. And ultimately, then several years ago, started putting together what became Build Real Estate Wealth. Enjoy the journey of rental property investment, which is becoming kind of the go-to resource for changing your life with rental property. It's a big book, got 460 pages of everything you need to know. But don't be scared, because what we did was inside the book, there's a lot of bold type print, sentences, paragraphs. And if you did nothing but go from bold type to bold type to bold type, it's a very easy read, quick read, and you will get the whole idea of what's going on. And if you want to stop and learn more, just read it all. But
Yeah.
it's become a bestseller, and so it just is a pleasure to me to kind of impart some experience and knowledge, to help others that are
Mhm.
wanting to own and operate rental property.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about your book last episode. And now this was over a year ago, so it's congratulations on all of its success. But I highly recommend it. Is on available on Amazon. You can also get it on Kindle. But it is extremely practical. And again, if you listen to the episode with Joel, you're going to hear me say this again. But so many real estate books don't focus on the do this, not that, and really
Mhm.
detail it out. And Joel's does that. So if this is a true kind of a how-to book. And so I completely agree. If you want to learn the inner workings of real estate investing and how to do all of the things, how to do tenant screening and property management and, well, some risk that come with that, it's extremely detail oriented. So highly recommend.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, most books in the genre are 200-300 pages long, and they cover acquiring and holding and getting rid of rental property and managing tenants. But the reason why mine's a little longer is because we do start with getting you in the right mindset for being an investor in rental property, and taking you
Mm-hmm.
through setting up an entity, if you're going to use an entity to invest, and building your team so that all that's in place before you even buy your first rental. And then later in the book, after we've talked about managing the property, we get into best practices that you can apply to the rental business. And there happens to be a bonus chapter in there on house flipping. It's not a book about rental property per se, but there is a chapter about flipping houses. And then when you get to the end of it, there's a QR code that if you follow the link from the QR code, it gives you bonus material on the how-to of house flipping. So that's sort of a bonus in the book. And
No, that's awesome.
yeah, it's kind of all encompassing. And in fact, Lindsay, there's like 150 checklists, bullet point checklists in there of,
I love that.
you know,
I'm a list person. I'm a very,
yeah,
type
Isn't
A
it great?
person. I like to have the to dos. I like to know exactly what I need to do, what's coming up. And so I think that that's extremely beneficial, especially in
Hmm.
a world where you're inundated with just excess information and
Right.
excess of, hey, you could do this or this is somebody's opinion. Having it very just itemized for you like that, I think is very beneficial.
Yeah, yeah, that you're right. It's nice to have it all laid out. I'm like you. I like to when I read something, a how-to. I mean, after all, this is not a novel. This is a
Right.
how-to book, a self-help book, a self-improvement book of some sort. It's nice when the information is really laid out clearly and bullet pointed. But it's got all kinds of lists like everything from tenant screening questions to questions to ask references that are given on
Hmm.
applications, um, negotiating deals, um, um, the process that you would go through for determining uh, whether the property is viable and so on. And we would call that due diligence. And heck, there's even a checklist in there. If you're really getting started, the tools you might want to own, hand
That's
tools and stuff.
amazing. No, that's great. But that's
Yeah.
that's great
So,
because again, with all the information out there, it can be extremely overwhelming if you are at the very, very, very beginning and you're like, "Hey,
mhm.
I have heard enough. I know enough that this is a path I want to go down. Where
uh,
in the world do you start?"
yeah.
And so providing those things it's a necessity. I think it's a great educational tool.
I would add though,
Um
it's not just a book for very beginners though. It is for more advanced investors as well who are just looking for some new game-changing information to kind of supercharge whatever they have going on. So again, you can get out of it what you want with the
mhm.
how much of an in-depth read you want to give it, but you would love the bold type words and
Oh,
paragraphs that
you
you
know,
could
I
just like,
yes,
oh, I see it, I
absolutely.
see it, I see it, go from this to this to this. Yeah, and then if you're interested in, read more.
That's the type of person that I am.
Yeah.
I like
Hmm.
all of that. Okay, so I wanna talk a little bit about your experience. Like you said, I mean, you've got decades of experience and decades of investing. What's something that you say you probably do less now that most investors think they need to do more of? What's something that you're like, hey, I don't have to do that as much.
Well, one of the things would be if you build your team, uh, you are only going to be able to scale if you're able to have other people do things for you. And in particular, probably the first thing you're really going to run into is the necessity of using other tradesmen, let's contractors to do things that you either aren't skilled on doing or you really don't want to do, and so as you go through the ownership of rentals, it's all about building a team of people that do the things that you don't want to do or can't do so that you can concentrate on the main thing, which is actually acquiring property and or selling it, as manipulate your portfolio and making business decisions about which direction to go, and the bigger you get, the more people you draw into that. Like, for example, that might involve somebody like yourself, property managers and so on, and accountants and attorneys and things like that. So, what I do less of is really the hands-on stuff with the buildings. If I do because I kind of like it a little bit, I'll still get
Mhm.
involved with maybe a light turnover in between tenants or something like that. But Lindsay, if I can't fix it with glue gun, screw gun, duct tape, or goop glue, I'm calling somebody. So, but here's the thing. Um, you kind of want to learn how to do things like that when you start out, uh, because and I don't regret doing it. When I started, my father was still alive, and he had a lot of carpentry skills and taught me those sorts of things. Um, but I learned from doing a lot of the things myself early on that what to expect from other people and what can be done, what to ask somebody to do, approximately
Mhm.
how much time it should take. eventually what
Right.
the cost is, and so you learn that. But
Yeah, I mean that's the best way to gain experience, right? Is just
mhm,
to kind of get in there, get your hands dirty, and learn.
mhm.
Let me ask you this. So I completely agree. Building your team up and having them be able to handle all the things, so you can, you're doing less of that. What would you say was the first thing that you offloaded? What was the first thing that you were like, hey, I need to find somebody when back decades ago when you were starting? What was the first thing you got rid of?
Plumbing.
Yeah.
I did that so early. I can tell you, in my entire 48-year career, I have never once changed out a hot water tank. Just not my thing there. So,
Don't blame you.
yeah.
I don't blame you. But so more on the property management side, getting rid of that.
Yeah, yeah, because I came from having a very flexible, source of income other than my rental property investment. You may recall we talked about how I had been a professional mobile disc jockey. I think we talked about that on the show before. But yeah, okay. So
Sure,
a lot
yeah.
of guys come, or women, that are getting into this. They are coming at it from having a full-time job.
Mhm.
And in fact, the book is written about how you can add rental property to your already busy life and grow a rental property portfolio while you still hold on to something else that you are passionate about. Like it could be a job, a career, or whatever, or a hobby that takes up a lot of your time. And it's not necessarily your objective to get to the point where all you did was real estate. But of course, many people reading the book and they get involved, that is their goal, is to get rid of their W-2 job, as they call it, because job stands for just over broke, so
Mm.
um, that could be their objective. And the book does give you the tools to get to that point. But I had pioneered the professional mobile DJ business in this part of the country. And I started that while I was still on the radio. I was on the radio for a few years back in the 70s. And I ultimately did that for 35 years. I did 5,051 appearances. And that ended, I retired from that in 2011. So I was simultaneously growing my rental property portfolio while I was a performer. And so that left me a little bit more flexibility than a lot of people might have if they have to go to a job 8 to 5 every day, 50 weeks a year. Um,
Mhm.
so I, I was able to, spend time acquiring property and building a team and doing some of these things during the day, during the week. You know, but I get it that a lot of people work during the day, during the week, and so
Right.
they're going to be doing adding rental property in the evenings and weekends and so on. And um, getting to the point
Yeah.
that they have a comfortable portfolio where they're adding to their income from a job that is not giving them enough income, or building their retirement from a job that is giving them no retirement. You know.
Yeah, no, and I think that it's such a good point. It ties into really everything else. So if you've got a legal issue, you're not, hey, let me try to, figure out how to handle this. You're going to outsource that to an attorney. Same with preparation of your taxes. This is no different. Is that building the
Mhm.
people around you that are going to be the best at handling XYZ for you and partnering with them to help you get on wherever path you want to, whether it be a rental property portfolio or just investment in real estate in general.
Mhm.
One thing that I want to talk about, and we've seen a lot more of it lately. We talked about it last time on the podcast as well, was your son who has started investing in real estate.
Yeah.
And I think he was just purchased his first property, getting ready to buy a second one. And so now he's getting ready to buy a third, and he's a sophomore in college. So
Mhm.
talk about what that looks like, and what are some of the lessons maybe that you're watching him learn that's like, oh yeah, kind of you got to learn that the hard way, or uh just kind of share that experience.
Yeah, well, of course, he grew up hearing rental property talked about at the kitchen table
Yeah.
and around the house all the time. And just a quick side story here. When I was putting the book together, I was pretty much writing it as though he might be the only one that ever read it, because it meant so much for me to pass on what I know to him. And so anybody listening, I want you to know that there's nothing in this book that I haven't done or that I wouldn't do if I had the opportunity. I'm not telling you to do anything or suggesting anything that I wouldn't tell my own son. And so when he graduated from high school, he that was June of 2024. He bought his first rental property about a week after he got out of high school. And when we talked last year, he was just about ready to close on buying his second property, and those are both going real well. And as you mentioned, he's looking for another one now. This time, he wants to do a flip because he wants that experience. He knows that we had flipped about 100 houses, in his lifetime. Well, not in his lifetime. He's 20, So um, anyway, his purpose would be to get a chunk of money to go buy more rental property. You see, and our succession plan is that I say our, my wife and I um, plan to sell all of our properties to him when he gets out of college, but I ain't giving them to him. He's got to have some money. I'm not going to the closing as a seller and bringing money to the closing. You know what I mean? So he's got to get some significant money on hand in order to have even a small down payment and take over. What we've got, and we may not be able to sell to them all at one time. So, but it is going well. He has. Actually, since we talked, he was a student in a Landlord 101 class that I taught this past spring. I'm in the professional organization of landlords in this part of the state here. I'm one of the board members and a longtime past president and the main teacher of our Landlord 101 class, which our organization came up with on its own about 10 or 12 years ago. But he was a student there and got a certificate for that. And he's a finance major in college at Penn State at the branch campus here in Erie, but he is not going to college to learn how to get a job like an analyst or something in a brokerage firm, something like that. He's going to college to learn how to never have a job. So
Wow.
he's learning what he's learning in the business department there to put to use for his own purposes, in the rental business.
So is there something that he's maybe come across or learned or experienced that maybe blindsided you guys, or do you feel like he was adequately prepared in purchasing?
Oh, I think he was prepared. He if he whatever he needed to know, I've been helping him like to walk his way through the deals and tenant issues that came up. The two places that he bought, the first one had 3 units. The one he bought second was a 2-unit place, and in each case he inherited the tenants. These were not fixer-uppers. These were ongoing rentals.
Mm-hmm.
He's still a student, and he's not really prepared to do some full-blown renovation project.
Right.
So that was part of the criteria that we had for him to get started. But and he still has all the 3 tenants in the first place that he got, but the second one had one group of tenants that needed to go, and after a few months, he went through an eviction, a full-blown eviction that went all the way
Wow.
to the constable coming and throwing these people out. I loved it. I haven't had a constable at an eviction for a while. I couldn't wait to be there. It was great, and they just they were oblivious. They were fully aware of when the constable was coming, and 11 o'clock on a Friday morning, we get there. There were 6 people in the house, and only one of them was one of the actual tenants. There
Wow.
were two
Yeah, no, it's
tenants
pretty
that,
rare that you make it to
yeah,
the point of an actual set out
yeah,
because
you would
the
think they
majority of
would
the
leave.
time they're
I mean,
vacated.
it had 2 tenants on the lease, and the one tenant had already moved out several months before and left the other one there. and she just started collecting people. And she even came to the district judge hearing about the eviction, and spoke, and you know fully understood what was going on. Knew she had to be out. Knew she was getting a judgment against her. That had to be paid, or just remain on credit report. And yet, when we got there with the constable, um, it was though they hadn't even thought about it, you know, leaving. But they managed to quickly get all their stuff out, and whatever was left, she agreed that it was trash and we could get rid of it. We weren't didn't have to make any arrangements for her to come back and get anything. And we had a dumpster
Mhm.
there that afternoon, and you know, it was all in there a day or two later.
Oh, wow.
So, uh,
Mm.
but that doesn't happen very often. And
No, it doesn't. It's pretty
yeah,
rare in our market as well.
yeah, I mean, and state laws vary obviously on landlord-tenant laws, and so there are varying degrees of ease of getting people out that haven't paid the rent.
Mhm.
Where Pennsylvania
Yeah,
is not too bad. It's sort of in between, the
gotcha.
landlord and tenant leaning with the laws, so they're pretty fair.
Okay.
And uh, so then he had to go through the experience of, we did a little mini upgrade, in between,
Mhm.
and spent a few $1,000s on that. And so he went through obtaining a tenant for the first time after already being the landlord for like a year and a half to that point. So
Now and then finally getting able to or being able to place the tenant. And that's a lot of lessons to learn as
yeah,
a 19, 20-year old.
yeah, yeah. So
Shifting to your experience as a hard money lender, it's
mhm.
kind of like I said in your bio, one of your many things that you're doing. What would you say is one way in particular investors will maybe misuse leverage, in based on kind of how the market is?
Well, first of all, to give a little bit of background, typically we're lending to an investor who's doing one of two things. They're either borrowing the money to buy and or rehab a single family home that they're going to sell to a third party, which would be a flip, in which case we get paid off when they sell the house. Or we're lending the money to buy and or rehab a single family home, or excuse me, a keeper rental property that they need to stabilize, either by doing rehab or getting different tenants in there or somehow raising the rents so that they get to the point where it's attractive to a lender uh, to lend on it for permanent financing. So where they run into trouble, they can be off on how long it's going to take them to complete the project, which uh, increases the holding costs, which include the interest you're paying on your hard money loan, plus taxes and insurance and so on. They can be off on the amount that they're going to spend on a rehab. And one of the places, though, that they seem to often get into trouble is more with the keeper rental properties, because that requires that the borrower of the hard money loan uh, be able to obtain permanent financing in the allotted time. Now, typically, a hard money lending loan is a year, maybe a year and a half, and so they pretty much need to have a relationship with a lender, a conventional lender of some sort, going in, so that they know that they can finance out. But
Mm-hmm.
things change with the lenders. They change their appetites for the type of properties that they want to lend on. I've seen them literally say, we've got enough 1 to 4 units right now. We're actually shutting that down altogether. And they're only going to look for larger properties. And so, um, and they can change their loan to values that they require. And just like the landscape looks different by the time they're done rehabbing the rental property. And so they could get into trouble whenever they go to finance out. And things can change in their own business life in terms of their attractiveness as a borrower to
Mm-hmm.
lenders that like the lender might say, we've already got enough properties or loans with you, and so we have a policy that we're not going to loan you anymore till you close out some of the loans you already have. Those sort of things can happen. So uh, you asked about where they get in trouble, and I think
Mm-hmm.
mainly that is not so much on the flips. Um, if unless you're really wrong on what you can sell it for, because the market does change, you know,
Yes, absolutely.
and how long it
What
takes.
would you so like kind of on the flip side of that, so that's kind of where investors can find themselves in a situation. And yeah, I mean, construction costs,
Hmm.
construction labor, all of that has been extremely volatile over the
Hmm.
last, 4 or 5 years. So fine tuning that and making sure that that's accurate. Yes, I can definitely see that getting investors in trouble. What are some of the things that you would tell investors, hey, when you're choosing a hard money lender, like this is something that you need to look forward to, this is something that you need to be aware of, this is what to ask, what not to ask, et
Hmm.
cetera, et cetera.
Well, you know, it's probably better to work with an established hard money lender in your area there. And the way you find those people is just talking with the other investors. And I am a big proponent of belonging to local or area organizations of investors and landlords, so like RIAs, they sometimes call, say, real estate investor associations and so on, where you're rubbing elbows with other people doing the same thing that you're doing, and you'll quickly get to find out who the good people are and who the bad people are that the others know about in all kinds of areas, like tenants, contractors, lenders, bankers, and insurance people, and so on. So I'm a big proponent of that. So if I will say this, if you are going to deal with a hard money lender, it's better the closer they are to where you are, I think, the better. Because here's my axiom: the further away somebody is that tells you that they're a hard money lender and they are offering themselves for this non-conventional type of financing, the further away they are from where you are geographically at, the more that lender will seem like a bank, a conventional lender, because
Mm-hmm.
the more underwriting they will have to do because they're not right with you and the property in the town that you're investing in. With me, the investors call me up, and we talk about the deal over the phone. And if it passes muster over the phone, and sometimes it doesn't, but if it does, the next thing is to walk the property. And so that's an advantage that I can offer to the other borrowers in our area here, is that they're not asking me to lend on any sort of a project that I haven't already done, probably in the area that they're doing their property over the years. So
Mm-hmm.
when we're walking that property inside and out, every unit, I'm just asking questions like, hey, did you see that? What's your plan for that? And so on. And I can tell you that by the end of that walkthrough, sometimes that investor is absolutely sure they do not want to buy that property. Not because I talked them out of it, but because I knew to ask the right questions and I was physically there with them looking at the project, as opposed to being in some other state, that is going to have to do a lot of underwriting to try to get to that point. And then, if they want to go ahead with it, I simply come back to the office and send them a loan terms email that they just reply that they agree, or if they have questions about it, we can talk about it. And once they say they agree, then we just forward that to the attorneys to let them, bring the deal to close. Sometimes the borrower uses our lending company attorney to represent them as a buyer, and sometimes they have their own, you know, uh,
Mm-hmm.
attorney to represent them as a buyer. And sometimes we have the trifecta, which is they're dealing with a private seller who has no attorney. And so it ends up that my attorney not only represents the seller, but represents the buyer and represents us as lenders. Of course, they sign off that if there's ever a conflict down the road, they can't represent anybody but me. But anyway, that would be uh, another thing that is part of the answer, and that is to make sure
Mm-hmm.
you're dealing with a lender that actually does make sure that there is proper documentation of the entire deal. You see, the beauty of doing hard money loans are that there's very little underwriting. You can close quickly and so on. But beyond that, we still have all the same paperwork that a bank would have. It's in the sense that there's a note and mortgage. We're a note and mortgage state as opposed to deed of trust state. So whatever you've got there. All right. And then you've got a personal guarantee, and even if you have an entity that you're buying in, you're going to guarantee outside that personally. And there's going to be an assignment of rents. So if you're not paying your mortgage payment, the lender, and a bank has the same thing. The lender can present to the tenant this assignment of rents and say, hey, you've got to pay us the rents every month because your landlord is not paying their mortgage. We'll take our mortgage payment out of your rents and give the rest back to your landlord. But this way you make sure you get your payment, because you don't want to have somebody collecting rents and then not paying them, the lender. What's going on there. So
Right.
and then you have uh, a deed in lieu of foreclosure, which is something that you as a borrower sign at the closing, that is held in escrow. I don't touch it. The attorney has it, but it's a deed that you've already signed transferring that property to us. Now, naturally, that's not going to happen unless we all talk about it and you just say, I can't pay this. Just record the deed. And that saves the whole process of foreclosure, which is an embarrassment to the borrower and time consuming and costs money to the lender. So we just circumvent that with a deed in lieu of or instead of foreclosure. And
Gotcha.
so what to watch out for is to make sure that somebody actually has good paperwork and somebody can be a lender can be involved with you in helping you make good decisions about borrowing. And in my case, if they want it, I can offer them input during their project. Like they'll call and say, "Hey, what do you think I should do with this bathtub?" kind of thing, and, I'll tell them. So that's a plus
Man,
that I
I
don't
think
charge for.
that yeah. No, I think that that ties into everything that you've been saying about kind of building your team, and that having your lender as part of your team,
Yeah, I'm now
especially
part of somebody
locally.
else's team,
Yeah.
in addition to
Right.
me having to
That's
have a team.
yeah, that I mean, and that's huge, being able to use your expertise and maybe fine tuning some things that need to be done, or catching things that they may not have missed. So finding someone who is local and who has been in the business, local to your market, is well aware of, you know
Mhm.
to know whether or not the deal is good. I think that's really really good advice uh for anybody who is looking to flip or buy rental property and do it on their own, and utilize a hard money lender. I think that's great advice.
Now, if you have a good
um,
relationship with a hard money lender, then you can go shopping for property knowing that you can put in quickly, if you come across a deal, put in an offer for all cash, because essentially a hard money loan is an all cash deal. You're getting typically 100% of the purchase price, from your hard money lender, and you're not doing the underwriting that a bank would require, so that when if you were buying a property and depending on bank financing, you'd have to put in your contract contingent upon financing, right? So if the financing doesn't work out, you can get out of the deal. Well, if you have a relationship with a hard money lender, you just make an all cash offer, and all you put in there is contingent on my partner's approval. And I'm your partner that you're referring to. So we still have to walk the property. And if it turns out that after you walk the property and with me that you don't want to buy the property, well then your partner didn't approve, and the contract is over. But it gives you the confidence that you know where the money would be coming from, and then you quickly call up your hard money lender and tell them about the contract you just entered into, and hopefully the hard money lender has all the money, that you need, because we do run out now and then. But uh, if 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 that was the case, you might be able to go on to a different hard money lender, or you just have to back out of the deal because your partner didn't approve.
right. Yeah, I think that's such a good advice for anybody getting started is if you are going to go that path on the financing side,
Mhm.
try
And
to
I
find
might
a
add
partner
that a
like
hard money
you.
lender, though, is not your first stop if you're an investor. When you come to a hard money lender, this is a very relationship based transaction, where I've gotten to know you personally. I'm here where the property is, and uh, it's um, it's very relationship based. So you need to show that you can pull a rehab project across the finish line on your own a couple times, because most hard money loan deals involve a property that needs some sort of a rehab, typically. And so we need to know that you can uh, actually accomplish something like that. And if you're buying a rental property as opposed to just a flip, then we also need to know that you have some experience being a landlord. I literally require new, uh, hard money clients that maybe they've already got some rental property. Typically, if they're coming to me for a loan on a rental property purchase, we're not going to go anywhere until they have some experience as a landlord. But I would require them to take the landlord 101 class and join our professional organization. And then I end up teaching the landlord 101 class. So, I make sure that they know what they got to know to be successful. I want them to be successful. I don't want them to just borrow from me once, crash and burn, and get out of the business and never come back.
Right.
So if you're a hard money lender, typically you're in the arc of your um, professional experience in this business, where you're later on. You've done it all. You've acquired some money, and now you're going to use the money to help people that are earlier in their journey. So you've got to prepare to impart your knowledge.
I love that. So before we wrap, you've got so much experience. I'm just curious, kind of what keeps you curious about real estate after all these years, after all the deals and all the avenues and your book? What kind of keeps you engaged with real estate?
What keeps me engaged? Well, in each area, like for example, the hard money lending area, what keeps me engaged is every deal's different. Every project's a little different, and I'm seeing newer people in the business grow and just really expand their knowledge and so on. So it keeps me engaged watching that happen. Still having rentals in that area, what keeps me engaged is the never ending life stories of the tenants. You
It's
know
so
that you guys are
true.
property managers. It
Oh,
never,
it is
just when
so
you think you've
true.
heard everything, as to why they can't pay the rent or, you know, just why they need to rent your apartment. It's amusing. It's never ending. And,
The openness in
yeah,
which people will share their entire life stories
yeah,
or situations, when it's definitely not requested or
it's
needed.
almost a red
But yeah,
flag
no, it's
before they open up. You know what I mean?
a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah. But man, I'm our leasing agents and then, of course, our tenant relations manager, man, they have
Mhm.
some amazing stories.
Yeah, I might add just one other real quick thing because there might be some people out there listening say, "Hey, I think I should get into that hard money lending business." If you have never been a landlord or flipped property and so on, uh, and lived and breathed in this real estate world for a while, do not do it. It sounds
Absolutely.
like I made a bunch of money as a doctor. You know what? I think I'm going to be a hard money lending now to these other. You won't sleep at night because you don't know enough about what your lending clients are doing, and so I I don't recommend anybody getting into the hard money lending business unless they are uh, able to say that they've pretty much done anything that the things that the borrowers are asking to borrow on. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Great advice. Joel, is there anything else you want to bestow on us, share with the audience before we leave?
Here's my best advice: don't take advice from anybody that you wouldn't want to trade places with. you know.
Cool. I
So
like that. I
yeah.
like that. You know what? We're probably going to steal that. We'll give you credit for it, though, if we
Okay.
post it. Well, we'll definitely give you credit for that. But no, that was great.
And I
And
do
like I
want to
said,
tell you
Joel,
just three quick little things about my book. First of all, if you are in an organization locally of other investors and landlords and so on, where you meet with them, and your organization wants to do education, you don't have to come up with your own course like our organization did 10, 12 years ago. You could just use Build Real Estate Wealth as your textbook and have your students all have their own copies of the book and just teach out of that. Secondly, I believe that everybody that owns a copy of Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki should also own a copy of Build Real Estate Wealth, because it's a perfect complement to Rich Dad Poor Dad. It picks up beyond the theory that's in Rich Dad Poor Dad, covers all that as well, but also, like you said earlier, gives you the nuts and bolts and 150 checklists on what to do. And lastly, I will say that my book is not a lead in to some sort of an upsell to mentoring or coaching or seminars or boot camps or anything like that. The book is all I got, and it's all you need if you want to change your life with investing in rental property.
thank you so much, Joel. Like I said, Build Real Estate Wealth available on Amazon. And thank you so much for joining us again today and sharing all of your experience and talking more about your book.
Lindsay, it is a pleasure of helping people get to the point where they need to hire a big time property manager like yourself and your company.
Absolutely.
That's what they got to get
Absolutely.
to.
And that is On the House with Spartan Invest.